Part 1 of The Facade of Affection. I had always believed that love was something you felt with your entire being, something that consumed you, warmed you, and gave you a reason to wake up every morning with a smile etched upon your lips. That was the effect Elliot had on me. His presence was like a constant beacon of light, guiding me through life's uncertainties with an unwavering confidence and warmth that I had never known existed. We met in a manner most would label serendipitous, our encounter at a quaint little bookstore, almost too perfect, like a scene borrowed from a well-loved romance novel. Months blended into each other seamlessly, each day with Elliot bringing a new adventure, a new reason to fall deeper in love, or so I thought. As February ushered its way into our lives, with Valentine's Day looming around the corner, I decided it was the perfect opportunity to reignite the spark of our first encounter by planning a surprise trip to the very place that fate had intertwined our paths. Little did I know, my quest for the perfect Valentine's gift would unravel the facade I had so blindly adored. While Elliot was at work, I rummaged through our shared apartment for our collection of keepsakes, a box we filled with mementos from places we had visited, tickets from shows we had attended, and silly little notes we had written to each other. It was in our bedroom, tucked away in the back of Elliot's closet, behind this box of treasured memories, that I found it, an innocuous-looking journal that I had never seen before. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and a slight invasion of privacy guilt, I opened it, telling myself that perhaps it was filled with notes for a surprise he was planning for me. The first entry was innocuous enough, detailing a day we had spent at the park, but as I flipped through the pages, the tone shifted drastically. Words that once painted our life together, in vibrant strokes of love and affection, were replaced by cold, calculating text, detailing his manipulative tactics, his sheer lack of empathy, and how he considered our relationship a game in which he relished in the subtle shifts of power, documenting his experiments with my emotions as if I were nothing more than a lab rat in his cruel studies. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, a stark contradiction to the deathly silence enveloping our apartment. The man I thought I knew, the man I loved, had meticulously crafted each moment of what I believed to be genuine, turning our love story into his twisted playground. Racked with disbelief and a growing sense of dread, I continued to turn the pages until I stumbled upon my own name, highlighted in an entry marked with a future date. It detailed an upcoming project set for Valentine's Day, aimed to escalate his manipulative efforts and watch the culmination of his experiment, the slow unraveling of my sanity. Panic gripped me like never before, a sense of betrayal so profound that it seemed to pull the very air from my lungs. I had to tell someone, I had to get out, but fear rooted me to the spot, a gnawing understanding that confronting Elliot without proof could spiral into consequences I wasn't prepared to face. The decision to seek help came at a moment of sheer desperation. There was only one person I trusted implicitly, one person who I knew would believe me without a shred of doubt: Daniel. Our friendship had weathered countless storms, his loyalty never once wavering, and in the depth of my turmoil, I knew he was my only beacon of hope. That evening, under the guise of needing to work late, I met Daniel at his apartment, the USB containing a copy of Elliot's journal entries securely tucked into my bag. The moment he opened the door, seeing the pallor of my face and the tremors that shook my hands, his expression morphed from one of casual greeting to deep concern. "Lara, what's wrong?" His voice was laced with worry, his dark eyes scanning my face for clues. I broke then, words tumbling from me in a frenzied torrent, telling him everything from the discovery of the journal to the horrifying realization of who Elliot truly was. Daniel listened in silence, his face a mask of contained rage and disbelief. "We need to expose him, Lara. We need to make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else," he said, his tone brooking no argument. Together, we pored over the journal entries, plotting our next steps with careful precision, a glimmer of hope flickering to life amidst the chaotic despair that had taken residence in my heart. The decision was made then. I couldn't run nor could I hide. I had to face Elliot, but not alone, not without proof. The plan was dangerous, but it was all we had. And so, the stage was set for a Valentine's Day that none of us would ever forget. Part 2 of the Facade of Affection. In the days following my clandestine meeting with Daniel, the apartment I shared with Elliot transformed in my eyes. Spaces once filled with laughter and warmth now seemed ominously silent, every shadow a hiding place for the truth I had uncovered. I observed Elliot with a wary eye, terrified yet determined to document more of his manipulative tactics for our impending showdown. It was during one such evening, under the pretense of a normal dinner, that I felt the full brunt of Elliot's psychological games. We were sat across from each other, a meal that I had prepared lying almost untouched as we engaged in what could only pass for small talk. His comments were subtle at first, innocuous even, but laden with a hidden venom that only I could detect. "You seem distracted tonight, love. Is there something on your mind?" he asked, his blue eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. The way he emphasized love sent a clear message. He knew something was amiss. I forced a smile, feigning ignorance. "Just tired, that's all," I replied, hoping my voice didn't betray the fear coursing through my veins. Was his only response, his smile never reaching his eyes as he continued to observe me, like a predator sizing up its prey. That night, after Elliot had fallen asleep, I lay awake, pondering my next move, the journal's revelations casting a long shadow over my thoughts. I needed more evidence, something irrefutable that could not be explained away as a simple misunderstanding. The following days were a blur of tension and covert operations. With Daniel's help, I began documenting instances of Elliot's manipulation, each piece of evidence a jigsaw piece fitting into the disturbing puzzle of his true nature. Our efforts were not in vain, for as Valentine's Day drew ever closer, the reality of what I was about to do finally hit me. Valentine's Day arrived with a cold, unnerving calm. The day I had once looked forward to with joyous anticipation had now become a deadline for my confrontation with Elliot. Clad in the dress I had bought for the occasion, one that now seemed more a costume than a garment of celebration, I sat in my car parked outside our apartment, battling the storm of doubts that ravaged my mind. What if he denies everything? I thought, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight enough to whiten my knuckles. What if I can't go through with it? But then, I remembered his journal, the cold, calculated entries that detailed his twisted enjoyment in manipulating me. I thought of the future victims he would claim if I didn't take a stand. The fear that had shackled me transformed into a steely resolve. I wouldn't let him win. I exited the car, my steps slow but determined as I approached the door to our apartment. Behind it lay either my salvation or my ultimate downfall. Drawing a deep breath, I steeled myself for what was to come, reminding myself of the reasons I was embarking on this perilous journey. The love I had once harbored for Elliot had been irrevocably tainted by the revelation of his true self, but I was no longer the naive woman he thought he could control. I was ready to confront the monster that masqueraded as my partner. The plan was set, the evidence gathered, and with a final glance at the apartment that had been the stage for our twisted love story, I stepped inside, prepared to end this nightmare once and for all. Part 3 of the Facade of Affection. The moment I stepped through the door, the air felt charged, as though the apartment itself was bracing for the impending storm. Elliot stood in the kitchen, his back to me, seemingly engrossed in the preparation of our Valentine's Day dinner. The normalcy of the scene was surreal, a stark contrast to the chaos churning within me. "Happy Valentine's Day, my love," Elliot greeted, turning to face me with a smile that once would have set my heart aflutter. Now, it only served as a grim reminder of the facade he had expertly maintained. "Happy Valentine's Day," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. I placed my purse on the table, the concealed voice recorder within it perfectly positioned to capture every word of our conversation. "I thought we could start with your favorite wine," he continued, pouring 2 glasses with practiced ease. But as he handed me mine, I saw the slightest quiver in his hand, a crack in his ever-composed demeanor. I took the glass, setting it aside without taking a sip. "Elliot, there's something we need to talk about," I began, my heart pounding against my ribs, threatening to burst. The smile faltered on his lips, replaced by a look of bemused curiosity. "Oh, and what might that be?" The confrontation unfolded exactly as I had dreaded and hoped. With each accusation I hurled, each piece of evidence I presented, Elliot's facade crumbled, revealing the monster beneath. Initially, he denied everything, his responses laced with feigned confusion and hurt. But as I continued, his defense wavered, giving way to admiration for my tenacity, before finally devolving into rage. "So, you think you figured it all out, haven't you?" he sneered, the mask of the loving boyfriend gone, replaced by the twisted visage of his true self. "I don't think, Elliot, I know. I know everything," I replied, holding my ground despite the fear that gnawed at my resolve. In that moment, the psychological battle between us peaked, a deadly dance of wits and wills. Elliot, realizing his manipulation had failed, lunged forward, his intent clear. But I was ready. Dodging his advance, I raced for the door, my survival instinct overriding the terror that screamed for me to freeze. The chase was brief but harrowing, every second a lifetime, until I burst through the front door, the cold night air a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere I had escaped. Daniel was there, parked across the street, just as we had planned. He rushed to my side, ensuring I was unharmed before calling the police. The aftermath was a blur, a cacophony of flashing lights and whispered voices as Elliot was taken into custody, the evidence I had gathered irrefutable in its damning portrayal of his intent. In the days that followed, as I grappled with the reality of my ordeal, a sense of cautious relief began to take root. The man who had vowed to love and cherish me, only to reveal himself as a predator in disguise, would no longer be able to weave his web of deceit. Sitting in the once shared apartment, now stripped of all its previous warmth and comfort, I reflected on the nightmare I had endured. The journey from unwitting victim to triumphant survivor had been fraught with fear and uncertainty, but in facing the darkness, I had discovered a resilience within myself I never knew existed. The story of my Valentine's Day confrontation with Elliot would be a scar upon my memory, a haunting reminder of the price of misplaced trust. Yet, as I looked toward the uncertain but hopeful horizon, I realized that even the deepest wounds could heal, and from the ashes of the most devastating betrayals, strength and newfound wisdom could emerge. In the end, Elliot's attempt to shatter my spirit had only served to forge it anew, stronger and more resilient than ever before. This was not the Valentine's Day I had envisioned, but it was one that marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. One where the shadows of the past no longer held sway over my future.
The evening air was crisp, the kind of cold that hinted at the edge of winter's departure. My steps echoed down the empty street, a rhythmic companion to the fluttering in my chest. Tonight was the culmination of weeks' worth of conversations, exchanging thoughts and dreams with Samara through the barrier of screens. In a world where love could be swiped left or right, our connection felt like a rare find, an intellectual and emotional match made in the digital heavens. Yet, beneath the anticipation, a thread of unease wove through my excitement. The concept of our meeting was unique, at her suggestion, a blindfolded dinner date to focus on the essence of our connection, as she had put it. It was quirky, intriguing, and just a touch unnerving. Action beat 1. Standing outside the cabin, tucked away from the prying eyes of the city, I hesitated. The structure was shadowed, secluded, and silent, qualities that seemed romantic in our chats, but ominously tangible now. I draped the blindfold over my eyes, its fabric a soft whisper against my skin. This was trust, I reminded myself, stepping into the unknown. The interior of the cabin hummed with a peculiar energy. With my vision obscured, every sound was amplified. The crackling fireplace, the soft creak of floorboards, and then her voice. Close yet ethereal, Samara guided me to my seat with a touch that was both comforting and electrifying. Our conversation flowed as effortlessly as it had online, the darkness around us creating an intimate world where only our voices and laughter existed. It was disarming, how easily I bared parts of my soul to this unseen companion, encouraged by the anonymity the darkness offered. Action beat 3. The moment of reveal was a jolt back to reality. As the blindfold fell from my eyes, adjusting to the dim candlelight, I was met not with the welcoming gaze of Samara, but with an array of photographs that plastered the walls, images of me captured in mundane moments of my life, Some I couldn't even recall having been photographed. The cozy cabin transformed in an instant into a gallery of my privacy, violated and displayed. My heart, previously aflutter with anticipation, now thrashed against my chest in a rhythm of dread. The chair across from me was empty, the warmth of Samara's presence now a chilling absence. A realization, cold and sharp, pierced the romantic haze that had clouded my judgment. I had willingly walked into the lair of an obsession I had no measure of. The silence that enveloped the room was no longer comforting. It was accusatory, a testament to the naivety that had led me here, to this moment of revelation. The intangible thread of unease that had accompanied me to the cabin had woven itself into a tangible noose of fear and vulnerability. The shadows of the cabin seemed to close in, whispering of dangers obscured by the very darkness I had sought refuge in. Panic clawed at the edges of my calm, a stark contrast to the serene facade of the cabin. My immediate instinct was to flee, to escape this shrine to my unwitting participation in Samara's silent observation of my life. But something held me back, a mix of disbelief, a need for answers, and a faint, foolish hope that there might be an explanation that could mend the shattered image of what I had believed this night could be. Action beat 4. As I stood, the cabin's isolation became oppressively evident. My phone, previously a lifeline to the outside world, now mocked me with its silence. No signals penetrated this secluded sanctuary turned prison. My attempts to reach out, to contact anyone, dissolved into the ether, leaving me more isolated than I had ever felt. It was then, in the echo of my failed attempts at communication, that the weight of my situation truly settled upon me. A realization that I was utterly alone, save for the omnipresent gaze of Samara, captured in every photograph that watched me from the walls. The door, once an inviting entrance, now felt like a barrier to my escape. My approach to it was cautious, each step a battle against the fear that Samara might appear at any moment. The door refused to budge, confirming my fears that this night was far from a simple dinner date. Trapped, I was forced to consider confronting Samara directly, to demand answers, to reclaim some semblance of control over a situation that had spiraled into the realm of nightmares. Action beat 6. My confrontation came, but not with Samara. Instead, I faced the reflection of my own helplessness in the mirror that hung beside the door, a sudden, unexpected reminder of the vulnerability we all carry. It was a vulnerability that Samara had manipulated, spinning webs of intimacy and connection to mask the predatory obsession that lay beneath. As I stood there, staring into my own eyes, a plan began to form. A plan to escape, to survive, and to confront the terror that awaited beyond the cabin's deceptive tranquility. The night was no longer a veil of romance and mystery. It was a battlefield, and I was woefully unprepared. Even in the heart of my fear, a spark of defiance kindled. I would not let this night define me. I would not let Samara's obsession become my prison. With resolve hardening in my chest, I turned my attention to the cabin, to the secrets it held, and to the challenge of reclaiming my freedom from the shadows that sought to bind me. The cabin, once a quaint symbol of our nascent affection, had transformed into a labyrinth, a maze designed not to confuse but to intimidate, to remind me of my place in Samara's twisted game. Yet within this darkness, a defiant resolve took root. If escape was to be denied, then understanding, confrontation, would be my weapon of choice. Action beat 7. My initial exploration of the cabin revealed its secrets slowly, methodically. Hidden within Samara's shrine to our connection were clues, breadcrumbs left behind with the same meticulous care as the photographs. Notes, seemingly innocuous, paired with specific images, began to form a narrative, not of affection, but of surveillance, a timeline of an obsession that had quietly but insidiously woven itself into the fabric of my life. Action beat 8. The turning point came with the discovery of a letter, addressed to me in a script that pulsed with a desperate intensity. Samara's words spilled across the pages, declarations of a love that knew no bounds, no respect for autonomy. It was a confession and a manifesto, detailing not just her actions but her justification for them. Within this twisted declaration, I found what I needed, the acknowledgement of a meeting place, a spot where she hoped to confront me, to lay bare the depth of her feelings. Action beat 9. Armed with this knowledge, I prepared. The cabin, with its oppressively intimate ambiance, now served as a staging ground for my own plans. The door, previously a barrier, yielded to my insistence, a symbolic victory that bolstered my resolve. I stepped into the night, not as prey, but as an equal participant in this twisted game. The isolated spot Samara had chosen for our confrontation loomed ahead, a clearing bathed in moonlight, offering no place to hide for either of us. Ending. Under the relentless gaze of the moon, Samara and I finally met. Her presence, both haunting and haunted, a mirror to the obsession that had guided her actions. Our conversation, a dance around the precipice of sanity, revealed the depth of her delusion. But it also uncovered a strength within me, a determination to reclaim my life from the shadows. The confrontation peaked in a tempest of emotions, Samara's desperation clashing with my newfound resolve. The standoff, charged with the potential for violence, ended not in physical struggle, but in Samara's capitulation. The arrival of the authorities, previously alerted to my fears, ensured her obsession would no longer pose a threat. In the aftermath, the cabin stood silent, a testament to the night's revelations. As I walked away, the dawn breaking on the horizon offered not just the promise of a new day, but of a new beginning. A beginning marked by wariness, certainly, a lesson learned in the harshest of ways, but also by a rekindled belief in the resilience of the human spirit. The scars of that night would linger, both seen and unseen, but so too would the knowledge that even in the depths of our darkest encounters, we possess the strength to confront, to survive, and ultimately to move beyond. The dim glow of dawn barely pierced the thick fog surrounding the remote facility as our bus trundled to a stop. It was Valentine's Day, but instead of romantic dinners or heart-shaped chocolates, I found myself standing at the gateway to what was marketed as a groundbreaking study on love. The irony wasn't lost on me. My name is Alex, and if you must know, I was here because love, as most people understood it, seemed like a myth I could never decode. After a series of failed relationships, I became more a skeptic than a believer. When the invitation for this study found its way to my inbox, boasting an exploration into the depths of human connection, my curiosity, cloaked in professional interest, got the best of me. Maybe, just maybe, it could unravel the cynicism that had wrapped itself around my heart. The facility was stark, almost militaristic in its austerity, hardly the warm, inviting environment one would associate with the study of love. As I stepped inside, a sense of unease whispered through the corridors, leaving a cold trail on my skin. I wasn't alone. Glances exchanged with my fellow participants revealed a shared apprehension, an unspoken question of what we'd signed up for. But it was Jamie's expression that caught my attention, a mix of intrigue and defiance, as if she was already preparing to challenge whatever awaited us. Our first experiment wasn't at all what I expected. Separated into individual rooms, stripped of our possessions, we were subjected to hours of what could only be described as psychological prodding. Questions that dug beneath the surface, seeking the raw, unvarnished truths of our past relationships. It felt less like research and more like an interrogation. Something was off. As we regrouped, the atmosphere was tense, eyes darting, the initial camaraderie fraying at the edges. Jamie sidled up next to me, her voice a low murmur. "Notice anything strange about the questions they asked? It's like they're looking for something specific, not studying love," Jamie whispered. She was right. The questions, the isolation, it was all too calculated, too invasive. And so, driven by a shared suspicion, Jamie and I decided to do some investigating of our own. Once everyone else had retreated to their rooms for the night, we made our move. The facility was a labyrinth, but desperation lent clarity to our purpose. It wasn't long before we stumbled upon a room that wasn't supposed to exist according to the floor plans we'd memorized. The door was unlocked, an oversight they'd soon regret. Inside, monitors flickered with live feeds from each participant's room. It was surveillance, but not the benign kind. Notes littered the desks, observations that detailed not just behaviors, but emotional weaknesses, triggers. Jamie's hand found mine in the dark, a silent pact between us. We were in this together, come what may. Emerging from the surveillance room with our discovery, the weight of what we were against began to truly dawn on me. We were mere pawns in a game far more sinister than a mere study on love. But as fear threatened to take hold, Jamie's defiant glare in the dim light bolstered my resolve. Whatever this was, we were going to expose it. Together, armed with our clandestine knowledge, the conundrum we faced was not just how to confront Dr. Wright, but to do so in a manner that wouldn't immediately put us at a disadvantage. The morning brought with it a false sense of normalcy. Participants shuffling into the communal dining area, still groggy and haunted by the previous night's probing sessions. Jamie and I exchanged glances. It was now or never. We approached Dr. Evelyn Wright during breakfast, her demeanor as cold and composed as the steel walls that encased us. Her eyes, a predatory gray, flicked between Jamie and myself, a silent acknowledgement that she recognized the threat we posed. "Dr. Wright," I began, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, "we're curious about the real purpose of this study. The surveillance, the detailed notes on our vulnerabilities, doesn't seem much like a study on love." Her smirk was razor thin, her response measured. "You see what you want to see, Alex. Here we explore the boundaries of human connection. Sometimes to understand love, we must understand what drives us apart." But her words, meant to disarm, only fueled our resolve. The confrontation wasn't just a clash of words, but of wills, with the undercurrents of our conversation hinting at the brewing storm. As the day progressed, whispers of dissent grew louder among the participants, fueled by our covert dissemination of what Jamie and I had discovered. The seeds of rebellion were sown, and as the facility's overseers scrambled to regain control, we found our opening. The uprising began at dusk. It was chaos, a maelstrom of confusion and fear as participants, fueled by revelations of manipulation, turned against the overseers. Jamie and I, having anticipated the facility's response, orchestrated distractions, exploited security gaps, and led a beleaguered but determined group toward the main control room. The hallways echoed with shouts and the clatter of footsteps, a cacophonous symphony to our desperate fight for freedom. It was in these moments, caught in the whirlwind of revolution, that I saw the true depth of human resilience, the raw, unyielding spirit that Dr. Wright sought to break. Reaching the control room was no minor feat. Locked doors and security personnel were obstacles we met with a mix of cunning and sheer determination. Jamie's hand in mine was a lifeline, pulling me forward when the shadows of doubt crept too close. Inside the control room, amidst the chaos of fleeing staff and overwritten security protocols, Jamie and I faced the final hurdle. Seizing control of the facility's surveillance and communication systems, we broadcast the truth of Dr. Wright's experiments to the outside world. As the reality of their situation unfolded on screens across the globe, the facility's iron grip loosened, giving way to a tumultuous victory. We had turned the tables on Dr. Wright, using her own tools of surveillance and manipulation against her. Emerging from the control room, battered but unbroken, the world we stepped back into was forever changed. The uprising had shattered the facility's facade of scientific pursuit, revealing the twisted skeleton beneath. Our actions, fueled by a desperate desire for freedom and understanding, had illuminated the darkest corners of human experimentation. In the aftermath of our rebellion, the corridors of the facility, once clinical and suffocating, now echoed with the exhilarating sounds of liberation. Yet the final act of our escape remained unwritten, its conclusion resting in the hands of Dr. Evelyn Wright herself. She stood before us in the makeshift stronghold we'd claimed as our own, surrounded by the remnants of her life's work. The air between us crackled with an electric tension, a palpable force born of desperation and determination. "You cannot comprehend the magnitude of what you've undone," Dr. Wright stated, her voice a chilling mix of fury and admiration. She stepped forward, her gaze locking onto mine. "You think you've exposed a monster, but all I've done is peel back the veneer of societal norms to reveal the truth within us all." It was a standoff not of physical might, but of wills, a battle fought in the shadowy realm of ethics and morality. Jamie's presence at my side was a constant reminder of what we stood for, of the humanity Dr. Wright sought to dissect and redefine. "Maybe," I countered, my voice steady, "but in your quest for truth you lost sight of compassion, of empathy. You became the very thing you aimed to study, the darker side of human nature." The The silence that followed was pregnant with unspoken truths, a moment of reflection on the consequences of our actions, both ours and Dr. Wright's. It was in this silence that the facility's doors were finally breached, the world ready to pass judgment on the horrors that had transpired within its walls. Dr. Wright was taken into custody, her final glance back a complex tapestry of regret and defiance. The participants, once subjects of her twisted experiment, emerged into the embrace of a night that no longer held the tinge of fear, but the promise of a new dawn. Jamie and I stood at the threshold of the facility, the cool night air a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere we'd left behind. It was over. The facility, Dr. Wright's ambitions, the nightmare, over. But as we walked away, the facility shrinking into the distance, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey. From skepticism to belief, from isolation to unity, our experiences within those walls had irrevocably altered the course of our lives. In the chaos, we'd found clarity. In manipulation, we'd discovered trust. And in the heart of darkness, we'd uncovered an unexpected truth about love. It wasn't an enigma to be solved, but a force to be felt, shared, and defended against those who sought to redefine it. Jamie and I didn't speak much as we walked, the silent companionship a testament to the bond forged in the crucible of our experiences. The road ahead was uncertain, our futures unwritten, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a belief that even in the darkest moments, there is light to be found, love to be understood, and lives to be rebuilt. The tale of the Valentine's Day experiment would live on, a cautionary reminder of the dangers inherent in the quest for knowledge, untempered by ethics. But within that tale, nestled between the lines of horror and defiance, lay a deeper story, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the indomitable nature of genuine human connections. As the first rays of dawn crested the horizon, painting the sky with hues of hope, Jamie and I stepped into the unknown, united by a past we would never forget and a future we were ready to face together.
The Valentine's Day that was supposed to change everything started like any other cold, snowy day. My excitement was palpable, laced with the slightest hint of nerves, as I packed my overnight bag with the kind of care that bordered on ritual. This was, after all, the weekend I was finally going to meet Ely, my charming Tinder match, who had promised a romantic getaway that would whisk us away from the mundanity of daily life. His photos showed a man with an inviting smile, his messages filled with just the right mix of humor and insight. When he suggested we spend Valentine's together at a secluded cabin he claimed was in his family for generations, it seemed like the perfect escape, an adventure, a chance for something real in a world of fleeting swipes. As I drove through the snaking roads that cut through the thick, snow-laden woods, the scenic beauty did little to calm my fluttering heart. The idea of spending the weekend with someone I'd only known through pixels and text seemed suddenly daunting, yet the thrill of new connection drove me forward. When the cabin finally came into view, nestled in a clearing that glistened under the winter sun, it felt like something out of a fairy tale. Eli was there, leaning against the porch railing with that same inviting smile, his presence instantly comforting. He greeted me warmly, enveloping me in a hug that smelled faintly of pine and something else I couldn't quite place. The cabin interior was as cozy as I had imagined. Soft lighting, a fire crackling in the hearth, and an aura of solitude that promised a weekend away from it all. Eli's charm was in full effect, his conversation flitting effortlessly as he helped me with my bag and showed me around our temporary retreat. The initial nerves giving way to a simmering excitement, I settled into the evening. Dinner was a simple affair, Eli proving himself to be an adept cook, something he modestly downplayed as basic survival skills. As we ate, the conversation veered into stories of past Valentine's days. His tone, playful at first, took on a darker timbre as he recounted tales that were vague yet unsettling, dates that seemed too intense, too fraught with unspoken endings. The warmth of the cabin did little to dispel the chill that began to settle over me. My initial unease was soon overshadowed by laughter and Eli's assurances that the best is yet to come. Unable to sleep, haunted by the nagging sense that something was amiss, I ventured out of my room under the pretext of needing water. The cabin, serene in the daylight, morphed into a labyrinth of shadows and whispers in the night. My unease deepened with every creak of the wooden floors underfoot. It was then, in a moment guided by some unseen force, that I stumbled upon it. A hidden door, cleverly concealed within the cabin's rustic interior. Heart-pounding, I pushed it open, the hinges groaning softly. The dim light from my phone illuminated a small room suffused with a sense of long-held secrets. The air was thick with dust and something else, desperation, fear. The walls were lined with shelves, and on them belongings not my own. Women's bags, scarves, and most chillingly, photos and IDs scattered as if left in a hurried escape. A cold realization washed over me. Eli's stories weren't just stories, they were confessions. There I was, standing at the precipice of a truth too dark to comprehend, the romantic facade of the cabin crumbling away to reveal the horror that lay beneath. The realization of Eli's true nature set in, a psychological chill colder than the snow outside. As the reality dawned on me, a wave of panic surged through my body, electrifying every nerve with a stark, primal fear. My mind raced, trying to stitch together the fragmented confessions Eli had sprinkled throughout our evening. They were not mere stories told to entertain or spook me. They were thinly veiled truths of a disturbing past. The charming man, with his inviting smile and seemingly gentle demeanor, was a facade masking something sinister. Attempting to suppress my rising hysteria, I had carefully placed everything back exactly as I had found it, my hands trembling with the weight of my discovery. The darkness of the room seemed to press in on me, urging me to flee. Yet I knew I had to confront Eli, had to escape, but with careful tact. The once comforting isolation of the cabin now felt like a trap, the snow-laden woods surrounding it a prison. With my heart lodged firmly in my throat, I made my way back to my room, plotting my next move. The calm and collected exterior I maintained was a stark contrast to the turmoil that churned within me. Waiting for the right moment was excruciating, each tick of the clock a thunderous beat in the suffocating silence of the cabin. And then came the moment I had both dreaded and anticipated. Eli sought me out, his demeanor unsettlingly calm as he inquired why I was up and wandering at such an hour. The cabin, once a scene of anticipated romantic escapade, became the stage for a chilling psychological confrontation. He seemed to relish revealing his true self, his eyes gleaming with a predatory glee as he confessed his delight in the fear he saw reflected in my eyes. It was a game to him, a twisted hunt he had orchestrated from the moment we matched on Tinder. A cat and mouse chase ensued, the cabin transforming into an eerie maze. My instincts, honed from years of navigating not just the physical wilderness, but the human psyche, kicked into high gear. Each decision was calculated, from the paths I chose to evade him, to the silent prayers I whispered for strength and cunning. The knowledge that my life hung in the balance sharpened my senses, turning every shadow into a potential hiding spot, every item a potential weapon. My most significant advantage was my resourcefulness. Using my surroundings, I managed to create diversions, misleading Eli with creaks and noises, buying myself valuable time to think and move. It was during one such moment of deceptive calm that I stumbled upon his careless mistake. A phone, not mine, not his main one, charged and forgotten in the chaos of his own making. Seizing the opportunity, I sent out an SOS with my location, knowing it was my best chance for anyone to find me. The psychological warfare reached its peak when, cornered, I had to face Eli tête-à-tête. His twisted logic poured forth in a confession meant to break me, detailing how each Valentine's was a chapter in his demented fantasy. But rather than succumb to fear, I felt a surge of defiance. His underestimation of me was his downfall. While he reveled in his monologue, I meticulously planned my next and hopefully final move, leveraging every bit of knowledge and intuition I had to outthink the monster before me. My survival hinged on outwitting Eli, on being one step ahead in this deadly game of wills. The night air bit at my skin as I burst from the cabin, the darkness no longer an oppressive force but a cloak under which to mask my escape. Each breath was a gasp, the cold air searing my lungs as I plunged deeper into the snow-covered woods. Behind me, the cabin stood silent, a malevolent watcher in the night, and beyond it, Eli, his rage a palpable presence that fueled my desperate flight. My mind, sharpened by fear and the will to survive, recalled the layout of the woods from our earlier walk. Eli had unknowingly provided me with the knowledge I needed to navigate this treacherous terrain. Every step was measured, avoiding the crunch of snow when possible, using the moonlight to guide my path. The icy fingers of panic clawed at me, urging me to move faster, even as my body screamed in protest. As the cabin and Eli's presence faded into the distance, a new terror took hold, of being lost in the unforgiving wilderness, of the possibility that my message hadn't gone through, of Eli catching up. But the thought of succumbing to him, to become just another forgotten Valentine, pushed me forward. Then, through the shadowed veil of night, salvation, the faintest glow of headlights piercing the darkness. With the last vestiges of my strength, I emerged from the tree line, flagging down the approaching vehicle. It skidded to a halt, its beams illuminating a figure stepping out, a silhouette of hope against the stark white snow. Officer Ramirez, as I would soon learn her name, wore an expression that mingled shock and concern as she rushed to my side. Her steady voice, asking questions and issuing assurances, became the anchor I clung to, as the adrenaline that had sustained me ebbed away, leaving me shivering and exhausted. In the days that followed, my story unfolded in stark detail to the authorities. Eli was captured, the evidence I had gathered, combined with the ones found in the cabin and his erratic attempt to flee, cementing his fate. The hidden room's horrors and my escape dominated headlines, a chilling warning about the dangers lurking behind the veil of online anonymity. The ordeal had irrevocably changed me. No longer just a survivor, I became an advocate, channeling my trauma into a force for change. My story, shared from platforms and podiums, served as a sobering reminder of the potential perils of seeking connections in a digital age. Through this advocacy, I found a purpose molded from the darkest night of my life. Officer Ramirez remained a constant through my journey from victim to advocate. Her unwavering support and dedication to justice served not just as a foundation for my recovery, but as a lasting bond forged in the crucible of that fateful Valentine's Day. As I stand before another audience, recounting my tale under the warm glow of the community center lights, the shadows of the past no longer cling with the same tenacity. The ordeal at the cabin remains a pivotal chapter of my life, but not the defining one. It's a story of survival, of transformation, and ultimately of advocacy. In sharing it, I hope to light a beacon for others navigating the treacherous waters of online dating, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and a warning that sometimes the most profound dangers are the ones we never see coming.